open the meeting for questions and discussion on the 2025-26 budget and tax millage rate. I believe that takes us to Mr. Rathbun. Is that correct?
Good evening, board. Tonight, we're going to go through our public hearing, which is required as President Green indicated. We'd like to start with the first slide here. We're going to talk a little bit about our taxable values. So you can see 24, we had non-homestead, which is our operating. That's what our operating millage is based on. We had a base of about $335 million. And then you can see that's gone up to about $356 million. So we've seen an increase there of about 21 million or 6.36%. We also saw an increase in all properties, which is for our debt millage. So, you know, the non-homestead is really what it says. It means it's all property that isn't your home. So if you're a business owner, if you're a rental owner, apartment owner, you're subject to that tax. If you're a resident, you're not subject to that tax. All other properties, though, all of the properties in our catchment, New Baltimore and Chesterfield Township, are subject to the debt retirement millage of 10% or 10 mils. So you can see there that those went up also by about $86 million or 4.89%. And that's what we will utilize to for our millage. This is the base that we would calculate that millage on. I'm happy to take questions if anybody has some along the way too. Next slide is Headley, and we'll just talk a little bit about Headley rollback and what that means. So the Headley rollback, basically what that is it's supposed to kind of make sure that the taxable value is not growing faster than the inflation rate. So at some point in time, our community would approve a millage, and that millage is then compared every year, how fast it's going up, the rate of inflation versus how fast property values are growing. And if the property values are growing considerably faster than the rate of inflation, what they make you do is they make you reduce the number of mills that you can levy to try and flatten out the amount of taxation that is occurring. So that's what a Headley rollback is. And it, like it says there, it results in a decrease to the millage levy to ensure taxpayers are not paying more than they agreed to pay at the time they approved the millage. That's the intent. Okay, next slide. Talk to you a little bit about what that effect has had on us this year. So many of you will remember back in November of 2023, voters approved an operating millage. We asked for 19.4687 mills and for a period of 10 years to begin in 2025. The Headley millage reduction fraction for this year was at 0.9903. So it's reduced our mills to, well, let me back up for a minute. So the Headley millage is rolled back 0.9903. We're only allowed to levy 18 mills. We can't levy more than that. That's the max you're allowed to levy. So you're probably asking, well, why would you pass it for 19.4687 if you can only levy 18? The idea is we're hedging against future rollbacks. So every time there's a rollback like this year, instead of getting 100% of that mills approved, we have to reduce that. And now what's happened is if you do the quick math here, you know, from in 2023, we had passed it for 1.46, almost 1.5 mills over the 18 mills that we can levy. But you can see now in 25, 26 with the rollbacks, we only have about a little over a mil that is sitting there for hedges against future rollbacks. So, we're about, unfortunately, in the very beginning of that 10-year millage. And so what we're hoping is every time we roll back, we're going to take a little of that 1.0696 mils off the shelf and put that into our millage so that we can levy the full 18 mils. Because what happens is if you only pass 18 mils and there's a Headley rollback, you're stuck at that rolled back millage until you pass a new millage. So if it goes from 18 mils down to 17 mils, which would be drastic, but if it did, what ends up happening is you can't levy the full 18 mils of your operating budget. You have to levy 17 mils. You're going to collect less local money and the state isn't going to make that up. So you are shortchanging yourself because the state expects that you're going to have 18 mils levied. The next slide, this is also a little bit of a housekeeping requirement. Truth in taxation, similar to Headley, but different. This talks about any increase in total value. It's not necessarily measured against inflation, but any increase in total value of existing taxable property. What we have to do is we have to present to the public for comment that we intend to levy our full 18 mils. And there is no potential rollback for debt retirement that's exempt from this particular requirement. But if you didn't have this truth in taxation opportunity for folks, then any increase, if it goes up, 4.64%, like we talked about, you're going to see a rollback of that 18 mils for the truth in taxation. But because we're having this meeting tonight, we're giving people opportunity. We are intent on levying that full 18 mils. So you can see here 25, 26, and this will be reflected in the budget when we get to it here shortly. You can see we're levying 18 mils for our operating, which is what the state wants us to levy. We're levying 10 mils for debt retirement, which is what Anchor Bay has levied for quite some time now. And that's a total of 28 mils for the year. Next slide. And I apologize, a little small up on the screen here. So we've got really 4 columns. I'll be directing most of your attention to that third column, the one that's highlighted in a light blue. Let's see if I can hit it from here. Oh, sorry. So we're talking about this column right here. That is the proposed budget for 25, 26. So in the first column, we've got our 23, 24. Those are audited numbers that are already in the books, audited. We have in the second column, our 2024, 2025 amended budget that you amended back in, I believe it was January, I believe is when we amended that. And then now we're bringing to you tonight a final budget for the an original budget for the 25, 26 proposed original budget. In that budget, you can kind of see at the top there, we're looking at, I'll start high level and then I'll kind of go to the variances. So we're looking at total revenues of about $80 million. We're looking at expenses of about $79 million, a little over, it's closer to 80. So we're looking at a net revenue over expenditure next year of about $320,000. Now, let me get into some details there. So you can see on that final column, we have some variances. So one of the things we like to highlight for the board is what is the 2024, 2025 proposed budget, which you see there in yellow, versus next year's budget. What's changed? So we'll go through some of those variances and I'll try and explain those to you. So the first variance for our local revenue, that primarily, you see it's gone down about $150,000. That is primarily due to a grant that we received from DTE for our electric chargers for our buses. That was a grant we received in 24-25. We will not receive that in 25-26. So we have reduced that. In the state sources, you can see there, it's an increase of about $900,000. That's a number of items that are going into that increase and also decreasing that amount. So it's a flux. Some of the items are going up, some of the items are coming down. So you can see we're looking at, we made an assumption that we would get $400 per pupil in the next school year in 25-26. So baked into that number is an increase of about $2.1 million based on our enrollment. Also in that number is a decrease of about $3.3 million that we received in MIPSR's funds. We received those in 24-25. We will not get those same funds in 25-26. And then you can see for our federal sources, we've got a decrease there of about 1.6, 1.57 of that. And you'll notice the line below that when we look at our other sources. What's happening is we're kind of flip-flopping those funds. So we used to receive a special ed grant through the federal government called IDEA-B. And that grant was something that passes through the ISD and we've had for many, many years. Recently, we were approached by the ISD to see if we would be open to swapping federal money for local tax money that the ISD collects. And we were in agreement. It's a lot less administrative work. And honestly, it creates less audit problems for us potentially. And so this made all the sense in the world. So we've included that in the new budget. And that's the reason that you're seeing primarily an increase. Well, let me also say that increase of 1.57 you see there, because it's actually going down 1.6. The other piece that's going down is we don't have the sale of Sugar Bush in next year. So that is appearing in the current budget, but not in next year. So that's a decrease of about 2.7 with that increase of 1.5. And that's kind of how you're getting that variance. Coming down to expenditures, you can see there we've got a decrease from the 24-25 final budget that we'll present later in the meeting of about $1 million. A lot of that has to do with our 147G. That was a grant that we received in 24-25. We got about $670,000 for that grant. We will not necessarily have that expenditure next year because the state has changed the law and we're not required to contribute to that. So that's a big part of that decrease. We also had fully loaded with all the benefits and everything, a decrease in personnel cost due to retirement. So if a teacher on top scale retires and we're replace that teacher with a lower tier teacher who's brand new, obviously they're coming in at the bottom of the scale. There's savings in that regard. I will also mention to you that in that number also is about $1.9 million in increases that are going to staff. And really, I'll take that number down about it. It's about $1 million that's going to our teachers. So we have that's the amount that we're going to pay as a result of the steps. And I know that we'll have other conversations about compensation for other groups later this evening, but just so the board is aware, all of those have been incorporated into this budget, including the teacher step. So those are the things that are kind of increasing. We had a little bit of a reduction in summer school going into instruction. We also had some additional GSRP expenses in there. And that's one of the things we'll talk about as well. Kind of coming down, the major changes, I'll just touch on a couple of them unless there's questions. You can see the pupil transportation went down quite a bit went up quite a bit from 24-25 to 25-26. And that's really because we have not purchased our electric buses yet. As soon as we purchase those, they will be expensed. it'll likely happen next year. So we've just kind of taken some of those funds and moved them forward to 25, 26. That's about just under $2 million that we're talking about. And then what do we see? Other support services. So, this is still kind of an open question. Phil and I have been struggling with this for months, literally 6 months. We have a grant that we have administered for many years called GSRP, Great Start Readiness Program. And the state has had a big push, as you are aware, to extend free pre-K for all. And so we have solicited from the ISD to convert all of our ECC, early childhood classes that are tuition-based to a GSRP-based. So you're just going to see those show up in a different location that's more up in the instruction area than it is in the community services. So that's why you see that change there. So those are some of the major changes that we're talking about. I'll kind of go through and make sure I touched on all of those. So when we get to our revenue budget assumptions, I've touched on some of these, but I want to make sure I touch on all of them. So we assumed a decrease in pupil enrollment of about 50. That's very consistent with what we've seen the last couple of years. In fact, it's been a little bit less than that, quite honestly. So we think that's a good number. That will result in a loss of revenue of about $490,000. The increase to the foundation allowance, as I discussed, we're assuming a $400 increase per pupil. That's been pretty widely accepted by all three, the executive and the two legislative houses. So I think we're reasonably comfortable with that. That would increase our foundation, like I said, about $2.1 million. We also received a grant from, we're calling it the Hertel grant, but it's actually a single line item grant that we worked with Congressman Hertel to get through. And we're using a portion of it this year, and then we're going to have a portion of it in next year. So about $472,000. You can see below that the two clean buses awards that we received. We received one, and we're still waiting on our buses so we can pay that. And then we've received a second, and we've placed an order for 3 more buses. So we're hopeful that by the end of 25, 26, we'll have 6 new buses, electric buses. We also saw our enhancement millage go up a little bit. That's going to increase about $115,000. And as I talked about, we swapped out some of our IDEA millage, our IDEA funds, which are federal funds, for the local grants. And so we'll get even a little bit more special ed millage in taxation than we would through IDEA. Other increases, we also increased our MIPSers rate. So we get a reimbursement as a part of our state aid for whatever our MIPSers rate is. They reimburse us for that. So it went up not only on the revenue, but you'll see the same thing on the expense. It's an in and out. So it doesn't have much impact on the bottom line. The next one is these are the elimination of MIPSers that we talked about earlier. So you've got an elimination of MIPSers 147C2, which is about $900,000, and an elimination of $2.1 million MIPSers 147A4. So those will not be around next year. We've taken them out of the 25-26 budget. We've also eliminated any ESSER funds, the last remaining there from 24-25. And then we've decreased, obviously, the amounts for Sugarbush. We will not have obviously another sale like that this year. So any questions on the revenue assumptions before we move on to the expenses?
Todd, I do have one quick question. On here, you have an increased foundation allowance of $400 per pupil. In the past years, is that the same amount that you've been using per pupil amount of 400?
No, I mean, every year we've seen, I will say this, Dennis, we've seen in some years an increase close to that. But last year we received no increase to our foundation allowance. We literally received a 0 increase on that. So it can vary year to year depending on the budget, but we do have agreement between the governor and the two legislative houses, that 400 seems to be about the right thing. I know they're still doing battle on that subject, and Phil, maybe you want to.
Yeah, they don't agree on much, but that's the only thing that they've kind of agreed on. It is about a $400. Now, the expense part of it and what they're going to kind of push on the retirement rate and whether they're going to roll that back, which we'll get to on the other part. That's where there's wide variance.
All right, thank you.
Yes.
That may have been appropriate at your last slide. When you talked about the struggle between tuition-based versus GSRP, can you explain that? Was it just the decision
Yeah.
to move from tuition-based?
Yeah, so the state really has a push to make pre-K available to all 4-year-olds. There is some talk maybe even to 3-year-olds, but we don't know the exact result of those conversations. We won't until the budget comes out, which likely won't be until October. So what we do know is that we have asked for slots in our GSRP program, and really what the state is doing is the way they're rolling out pre-K for all is through the GSRP program. So rather than kind of invent a new program, they're just kind of shoehorning this into the GSRP grant. So what that means is we will receive funds for each student, much like a foundation allowance. Every GSRP student that enrolls, we will receive funds for that student. And then the families will not have to pay because the state is picking up the tab. So it's really a nice thing for folks that have 2 or 3, students that are pre-K, especially if they can get 3 and 4-year-olds in there, both ages. That could be a substantial savings to all of the families across. And educationally, it's great for our kids, right? To get them started on the right track. And so we're really pushing to make sure that all of our offerings this year are GSRP, and we will not have, if everything goes well, a paid option. Okay. All right. Expenses, some of our budget assumptions. So you can see increases in educational initiatives. So these are things like curricular. It could be software that is student-based. All of those would be included. We have included an increase of about $470,000 in the budget. We also included, as I talked a little bit about, negotiated wage compensation increases of about $1.9 million. So that is just salaries. That does not include the benefits. So if you want to, for kind of get an idea, you're probably looking at about 47% of that as benefits. And like I said, a big chunk of that, although we're going to look at a number of things later in closed session and the TAs that we're presenting, some of the groups did not have to go through a TA because they've got negotiated contracts in place. And I'll just highlight again, the teachers are getting $1 million on that step. So everybody's being included in the increases for next year. Instructional staff, attrition and replacement. So that we talked a little bit about that. That's teachers retiring are being replaced by, frankly, teachers that are at a lower salary scale. So we're not paying quite as much for that teacher, and that results in savings to the district. We've added a couple positions, and these are fully loaded, the 328 that you see there. So that's inclusive of salary and benefits, but we're looking at a district technology person, a security supervisor, and some curriculum improvement. Next item down, increase in summer school. We talked about $100,000 increase there. We talked about an increase for 147C. You may remember on the revenue side, we increased that. We're also increasing it on the expense side. So that went from about just under 11% to 15%. Health insurance. So we've increased for all the hard caps for next year. So our security services. So this is something I want to touch on. This has been a little bit of flashpoint today, maybe. I'm not on social media, but I heard this is a little bit of a flashpoint. We have a security increase for our security services of about $120,000 baked into next year. So that includes last year's amount, plus we're looking at about 120 baked in there for next year. We fully intend to have security services next year. We have budgeted for that. We wouldn't budget for it if we didn't plan on it. We are going to go out for an RFP on that. And I think maybe that's created a little bit of buzz, but we feel that that's important as good stewards of our taxpayers' money to make sure that we're getting the best deal we can get. And Fortis has done a nice job for us. We don't have any complaints about their work, but they're asking for a significant increase. And we just want to make sure we are being frugal and good with our taxpayer dollars. General liability insurance, that went up quite a bit, 30% increase. So that's about $139,000 just for our insurance. We didn't really increase, well, a little bit. We increased some of our coverage because we've added new things at the high school, but this is general liability, not property. So that's just a flat increase of about 30%. We've also built in some band uniforms. We've talked about that, I know, a number of times. And then we've got the cost of those electric buses built in. So those are some of the big hitting pieces there. Any questions? Okay, next slide kind of gives you a historical of where we've been and where we are today. So you can see there, you know, I think some of you will remember back to 2019-20 when we're at our low point there and we're under fiscal monitoring by the state. We've since pulled ourselves up by the bootstraps, and you can see now we're at a very healthy projection of just over 19% in the fund balance. As we've had multiple conversations with finance and other board members on this, you know, we're not necessarily interested in growing that fund balance into the future. That's what I would say is a healthy fund balance. Really, we're targeting 15, 16%, something like that is what we think we need to avoid a lot of our costs of borrowing. This is a little high, but I will tell the board this, it gives you the opportunity to be a little bit more nimble, right, in some of the decisions that you make. So if there's a decision, hey, we want to update our textbooks in middle school, and that's going to cost $400,000, you now have the means to do that. I think Pat might be one of the only ones that will remember this, but we had that exact thing come up back in 2019-20, and we had to turn that down. We couldn't make that purchase because we were losing so much money. So this really gives the board opportunities to, you know, if there's a change or something like that that you want to make, you now have the resources to do that. So at this point, I'd take any questions that the board has. Any additional questions, I guess?
Todd, do you know why our liability insurance went up 30%? Did we have like a lot of claims that we filed that caused our providers to increase that rate?
Mr. Powers, I think I heard you ask.
I'm sorry, can you explain why our liability insurance went up 30%? Did we have a lot of claims over the last year that caused our provider to raise the rate, or what was the reason for the increase of 30%?
No, I think that was the especially frustrating part of this is because both our workers' comp claims and our liability claims have been almost minuscule for the last 3 years. But this is just an industry standard. I've talked to a number of business managers. Everybody got hit with a 30% increase. That's just kind of what the economy is doing these days. It seems to be across the board. I talked to 2 other people that use SETSEG, who we use, and they're getting about the same increase. It's unfortunate. Yeah, we thought we were going to get a flat rate or maybe even a decrease because we've had such great claims, but not the case.
Todd, one quick question. On the millage from November 7th of 2023, if I'm reading this correctly, it's good for 10 years beginning in 2025. So the next time that it goes out to the public for an election would be 2035?
You are correct.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. So the concern there, Dennis, really is we've got just over $1 million kind of sitting on that ledge. And so, you know, if you get rolled back over the next several years, because I mean, the property values are just really going up right now. And if you continue to get rolled back, one of the things we might face into the future, 3, 4, or 5 years down the road, long before we get to that 30, 35 you're talking about, we may use up all of that hedge that we've got sitting on the shelf, and we may be down to 17.5, 17. I think when I got here 6 years ago, they were at about 17.5 or 17.4 mills that they were levying at that time. And we went out and we did a supplemental to add millage back on. So, we'll have to keep an eye on that depending on the rollback. It may necessitate us going to the voters and asking for restoration back up to the 18 mills. Because as I said, the state is going to assume you are levying 18 mills and you're getting all that money locally. If you're not, they don't make it up for you. You're just basically getting less than every other student in the state of Michigan.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Do we need to solicit comments from the crowd as well, sir, from the audience? Isn't that part of the hearing? Yes, no?
I'm sorry, I'm having a hard
Are
time
we
hearing.
reading the word questions on the screen? Do we need to solicit if any of our audience has any questions as
Yeah,
part of
if
this
they have
hearing?
questions, they're welcome to come forward.
So I'll open that up to the floor. If someone's got a question, certainly feel free to ask of Mr. Rathbun. Otherwise, we're going to move on. All right, hearing none, we are going to, I will entertain a motion to close this hearing and adjourn.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Vinatelli, supported by Ms. Knox. Comments, questions, or concerns? Hearing none, let's do a roll call to close this one, sir.
Sure. Mr. Vinatieri,
Yes.
Ms. Knox.
Yes.
Mr. Sunnyberger,
Yes.
Mr. Powers,
Yes.
Mr. Richards is a yes, and Mr. Green.
Yes. Motion carries. Meeting is adjourned at 7:16 PM. If the board so pleases, we'll move immediately into our 7 PM meeting.